All right, welcome to this edition of Startup Nation's coverage of Detroit Startup Week. I'm going to throw it right to our host today for this particular show, Jon Dwoskin.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hey,
Thanks, Jeff.
Take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you having, and I appreciate you co-hosting with me. I know we kind of changed that last minute, but that's going to be a lot of fun. So first I want to welcome everybody to Detroit Startup Week. It's such an incredible week of entrepreneurs, and even though it's virtual, the energy and the frequency and the vibration still feels high, even though we're sitting here in a studio with just, 5, 6, 7 people, social distancing and all of that. But today we're going to dive into a really, what I think is going to be a very in-depth conversation with some of the most amazing business leaders around. And we're going to dive into lots of topics. But before, I'm going to give you the list of people who are here, and then I just want to kind of talk a little bit about a couple of things before we dive in. We have Magie Cook, who's an inspirational keynote speaker and entrepreneur. She went from being homeless to creating a salsa that she sold to Garden Fresh and then to Campbell's for over $200 million. Michael Todesco, who's the Senior Director of Innovation at PayPal, who is, I don't know about you, but 97% of everything I buy is through the PayPal app. And
he's smiling.
There's a lot of things that I don't buy because I go to pay for it and I don't have my credit card on me, and so I can't buy it. So thank you, PayPal.
I wouldn't have a job without you, John. So thank you for that.
Yes, of course. We got Hilary Provinse, who is the Executive Vice President and Head of Mortgage Banking at Procadia. Hilary, how are you? Great to see you. I'm so glad you're on the show because banking is such an important topic. I mean, in 2008, when the market crashed, the banking money just disappeared. And today they're really part of the solution. And it's great to have your voice in what's going on. So thank you. Dan Russel Sr.
John.
Yeah, Dan Russel Sr., who's the Director of National Corporate Sales at Tryon Solutions. Dan, how are you? Good morning. Everything is about people and HR. And, having the right people in the right seats is so critical. And we're going to dive in and talk about that. And then Eddie Alterman, who's the Chief Brand Officer at Hearst Autos, former Editor-in-Chief of Car and Driver. I think we're all trying to figure out, are we going to be able to drive a car in 10 years, or will we be the outliers, only being able to drive a car that isn't automated on a farm? So it's going to be a great lineup. But I want to just spend a couple minutes, Jeff, and we can kind of go back and forth and talk before we jump in with the esteemed panel. Pre-COVID, studies showed that by 2030, 85% of the jobs that exist do not exist today. Two additional studies that by the year 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be millennials. And by the year 2027, 51% of the workforce will be freelancers. That was pre-COVID numbers.
Right.
So now the world has changed and continues to change. And so, it's been so interesting too, because again, pre-COVID, colleges have been trying to figure out how to teach to these new stats.
Wow.
And so they've been figuring out, how do we teach adaptability? How do we teach people to be nimble and pivot? And one of the things I see, and we're going to dive into this, is some of the most important things for any entrepreneur or any business person is A, asking for help, and B, execution. Consistent execution.
Of course.
And you can take two people with the identical skill set, and the person who executes every single day
wins.
They win. They show up, because if you show up and you execute every day, then you're being innovative. You're having the proper meetings. You're doing the proper things. And so I want to really dive into that. But any initial thoughts, and then I want to jump into the panel.
Yeah, first, I agree. Execution is critical, but it used to be that execution was the kind of thing where you set a business plan, excuse me, and you follow it. You execute against it. And today, one of the key hallmarks, I think, of a great entrepreneur that, as a result of the COVID crisis, is the ability to adapt.
Yeah.
This will largely be known as the era of the great pivot, right? And those that pivoted, it's always important for companies to stay current and fresh. Otherwise, you're yesterday's news.
Right.
But now it's kind of more acute. It's changing on a dime and adapting. And I think the great entrepreneurs, that's going to be critical as it relates to execution.
Yeah. And one of the things I talk about a lot is having not just a business plan, but a living business plan.
A living business plan. Now more than ever.
You need to be looking at your business plan every morning and every night at
Literally.
minimum. Literally at every night.
Yes.
So we have such an incredible panel. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here. And Jeff, thanks for jumping in.
My pleasure.
This is going to be fun. Hilary, I'd love to start with you. You are head of mortgage banking at Procadia, and I think a lot of people are, still kind of sitting back and thinking, is there money to buy things? Is there, right? What does the financial picture look like? Because I can have a business plan, I can look at it twice a day, I can adapt, but if there's no money to buy anything, then that makes it really difficult. And so I wanted to kind of kick off with you. I mean, you are, head of mortgage banking at Berkadia. You're seeing all over, seeing what's going on all over the country, maybe even the world. So kind of give us your take of, what are we seeing in the financial markets today? And I have some more questions, but let's start there.
Sure. So thanks for having me, John.
Yeah,
It's great
thanks for
to
being
be
here.
here today. I think what you said about pivoting and the ability to adapt has been key right now. I mean, we've obviously seen over the last 4 months the financial markets kind of crater. If you look at just the Dow and the stock market indicators, and then come back up when the optimism came back and people felt like some of the restrictions were getting lifted, and now we're seeing it go back down. And the theme that I would say is volatility. And I think we're going to continue to see that over the coming months. But what I will say is that Berkadia specifically specializes in commercial real estate, which is like the hard assets of society, right?
Yeah.
Buildings where people live, apartments, office where people work. And that part of the market is really been hit much harder in some ways, and it would be the sectors you think. Hotels.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to travel over the last, so 20% of our hotel properties are in forbearance right now. Retail. Look at all the small retailers that have not been able to, generate income to then pay their rent. So hotel and retail have gotten hit really hard. And the good news is on the housing side, which is to me, kind of a core necessity of American life, obviously, that's done remarkably well because we're all working in our houses. We need to pay our rent in order to stay in our houses to be able to do our jobs. So shockingly, the housing market has performed the best of all the sectors. And what we're looking for, honestly, is what will happen when the stimulus money starts to go away in late July and August. And I think all of us on the financial side are very nervous about that. And the reality is, if there isn't some sort of plan to replace that and people aren't going back to work to the extent that they had in the first quarter, which I don't think anyone thinks they will be, there'll be some serious challenges ahead for us.
You're talking a lot about very real challenges, real things. And in your world, I think it's more important than ever, and not just your world, but multiple worlds, to be a true advisor, to really guide people through this is not easy. And you have to, you have to spend time and research and prep. And so just before we move on, one more question for you, Hilary. How are you and your team really positioning yourselves as advisors to help guide people through this?
No, that's a great question. And as you know, because you work with a lot of our banking staff around the country, we have 150 commercial real estate bankers in offices all around the country. And we have, and I think we'll talk about this later, innovation as it relates to technology has been at the core of what we've been building as an organization, so that we have access to all this information from all our properties. We have a $300 billion portfolio of assets, and it's harnessing that and then sharing it with our clients from an advisory standpoint to really say what's happening on the ground in your neighborhood. What rents are we seeing with properties nearby based on the data that we have, using the tools we've created to get that into the hands of our clients in real time so that they can make educated decisions about where to invest, where to buy, where to sell. And that has really shifted our employees from being transactional focused, like you described, to being advisory focused.
Yeah, I love what you said about, giving them tools to make a decision. That is, I think, one of the hardest things for people. Jeff, I don't know what I see. I see many. Thank you for all of that, Hilary, because I think it's so hard for people to actually make a decision.
It's hard for people to make a decision, especially now.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what. It's hard to know where we are and where we're headed. And so making decisions, it used to be we could make a long-term decision and have some confidence in it.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore, really, as
Yeah.
small business operators especially. You know, to Hilary's point, I want to just underscore something that I think is really important. Hilary made the comment about, you know, the stimulus checks, this stimulus funding and so on running out. I think it's important to understand that I'm really concerned about the next few months because, to Hilary's point, kind of the euphoria and pent-up demand of us wanting to see us return to some kind of normal, I think drove the stock market and other things to give us a false sense of confidence that, you know, maybe we're going to be okay. But I think now PPP funding is running out, stimulus checks running out, and you know, the reality is starting to set in. We're seeing it reflected in the markets. It's going to, wow, you know.
But you know, my thought on that is because you know, this came on with such uncertainty, with just like a boom.
Yeah.
And so to me, the key is you really have to have if we go back to the business plan,
Yep.
a daily business plan.
You do.
You do. I mean, it's like, here's my 30-day plan. Here's my weekly plan. Here's my daily plan. So I want to go into, thanks, Hilary. Thanks, Jeff, for that. You know, Hilary's talking about innovation and having innovation to be able to make a decision. Michael, I want to come over to you because, and just segue from innovation to innovation, which at PayPal, because one of the things that PayPal's made it too easy for me to make a decision. Do I want this? Do I not? Click, I own it. So it's so how are you, right, as Hilary's talking about just, you know, retail sectors being hit, but more, you know, one of the things I want to talk about is, you know, we talk about innovation. Today, innovation, whether you're a professional service firm or whether you have a product, you must be moving to e-commerce. And there's a lot of tentacles of that, how e-commerce means when it comes to making sure that the professional service worlds and the people actually give them a reason to come back to work the next day. And then there's just making things easy. PayPal makes everything easy. And so how are you guys at PayPal looking at innovation today, kind of while we're in and post-COVID?
Yeah, thanks, John. I would say that this has been just an accelerant on everything that we've been doing as a company. To put this in perspective, you know, the volume that we're doing now on, you know, on a Saturday in April, which we publicly reported, this is more than what we were doing on Black Friday of last year.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yes, I mean, the transaction volume, the amount of signups we're getting for PayPal, Venmo, and the other PayPal Inc. family products is, you know, Honey, which is another one of our products, which people use to get coupons. It's really gone through the roof. You know, just to put out one data point that's actually not PayPal, but if you look at Shopify, Heinz Ketchup has famously opened up a Shopify store now. I mean, and so you look at these old school, big, you know, CPG companies out there who are now going direct to consumer and developing their own online presence. I mean, this is a shift change, and we are not going back. You know, it's been an accelerant on us and our business. We're all working like crazy. We're still hiring like crazy at PayPal to try and meet this demand. But this has basically been a step change that we've seen in the marketplace. And with that, it just means you need to reevaluate your customers' needs, number one.
Yeah.
So certain things like QR code payments, which we launched in 28 countries recently, that got pushed way forward on our roadmap as part of that, because, you know, the priorities are there. We've had to do things like we did PPP loans for nonprofits that were customers of PayPal. We have never done a loan for nonprofits. We literally, within one weekend, had hundreds of employees trained and then processing these loans in 4-hour time slots on Saturdays and Sundays, just to meet our customers' needs so that these nonprofits might be able to get the loans so they can operate. So, you know, I think there is that reevaluation of the customer's needs, and then just a hyper focus on what you need to do. I mean, there are still opportunities out there for anybody in any company, but it's likely shifted given our environment.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Thanks for that. That's, you know, I think you bring up one of the most important things, which is always knowing what your client is thinking, reevaluating their needs. One of the things I saw is people weren't really prepared they didn't have their plan B and plan C until this kind of hit March 12th, 13th ish. Were you guys prepared? Did you at PayPal, did you did you have meetings prior to kind of prepare for something like this? And if not, is it something you're going to start doing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a large company, and so we have the advantage of having departments focused on security and safety and all of those kind of things. And we're also, I guess, somewhat of the advantage of being headquartered in Silicon Valley. There was a parent at my kid's school who had this in early February.
Yeah.
And so we probably saw things a little bit earlier than some other parts of the country, save for the Washington area. So we were very much preparing for this. I don't think we knew it was going to be as long or anything like that. But
Yeah.
this was something I would say in February we started to work towards. And overall, I think we're still not sure about how we get back and what that's going to look like. But I'm happy to talk more about that
Yeah.
later. We have some thoughts on that.
Well,
Yeah.
it's when you're talking about fast forwarding and doing what you need to do, that goes back to what we talked about execution. When I give talks, sometimes I show this picture of 5 frogs, and it's a riddle. There's 5 frogs on the log. 4 decide to jump off. How many frogs are left on the log? I ask everybody, blah 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 blah. The answer is 5 because they just decided they didn't take action. And so,
Mm.
doing what you need to do and executing and being nimble and adapting and moving quickly while still making good decisions, going back to making a decision, is
Yeah.
so important. Jeff, any thoughts on that?
Well, I want to share with Michael, if I could, a little bit of story.
Oh,
You mentioned
please.
how you talk about innovation. You talk about how simple the PayPal product is to use,
Yeah.
and even how magical it is, right?
It's magical.
Magical.
I want to buy
And so
something right
to-
now just
right,
because I'm
so,
talking
well,
to Mike.
listen. So my kids have spent a lot of the last, and I know they contributed heavily on that April
Yes.
day that Michael made reference to, because they're on their computers playing games all the time, and they're
Right.
constantly asking me to buy these V-Bucks and other things
Oh,
that
yeah.
they're purchasing.
Xbox.
And
yeah.
it's funny, my wife came because they kept asking. She said, I'm concerned our kids really need to understand the value of money, because they clearly don't. They just keep asking for more. So I sat down and tried to have the talk with them. I explained to them what a dollar is, how hard I work for it, and so on and so on. And they said to me, Dad, we don't even use money. We use PayPal.
Right.
That's how
great.
simple it was.
That's
So
great.
there we
Yeah.
go. The magic of PayPal.
Well,
Yeah.
not for today, but we are moving to a moneyless society. But we can talk about that
Yep,
another time.
yep.
But no, that is hilarious. You're talking about your clients' needs. Eddie, I want to move over to you, and thanks for that, Michael. I appreciate your everything you shared. Eddie, when in the auto world, I feel like the auto world is trying to figure out what their clients need as they shift and they move to just cars that drive for you. I mean, it's so foreign to me because I love driving my car. It's meditative. It's great. It's like almost impossible for me to comprehend, but that is where we're moving. And I know there's lots of stats. And so what is how does the auto industry move? Especially they have been hit because of COVID. How are they moving from an innovative standpoint? Has it sped things up? Has it slowed things down? Just kind of how are they looking at it?
Well, pre-COVID, this was the most convulsive time in the auto business in 100 years since Henry Ford, and everybody had grandiose plans, as you said. Uh, but that great Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth."
Right.
That's what happened here. And what we're seeing is a couple things. There was a real big push toward autonomy, toward EVs, and some of the micro trends that are happening inside of COVID are very, very interesting. And one of them is the move back to personalized transportation. Some of that's being driven by artificial stimulus like 0% financing and things like that are happening in the market. But people want their own safe space right now. They don't want to get into an Uber. They don't want to be in shared transportation. And it comes back to this idea that innovation is really meaningless without the human component.
Yeah.
And when we think about autonomous vehicles and shared vehicles and things like that, the human element is the most important part. You can have all the tech in the world, you can have all the edge cases figured out, you can have everything figured out, but unless people feel comfortable getting into an autonomous vehicle or a shared vehicle, that innovation, that technology is meaningless. And an autonomous vehicle, people started asking a lot more questions in the kind of 2018, 2019 timeframe. And we actually did a big documentary with Malcolm Gladwell about it at Car and Driver and Hearst Autos. And one of the things we found out when we were reporting the documentary is when you're going from a self-driven car where you're a human-driven car, I should say, to a self-driven car, there's a risk exchange that happens. When you're in control, you feel very, very powerful, dominant, infallible. When you're getting into a car where the machine is in control, that trust threshold has to be much, much higher. When I talk about this, I always say, like, who wants to get on a 737 MAX right now? You know, statistically, very, very safe, right? Only 2 crashes out of hundreds of thousands.
Right.
But it matters who's doing the crashing. The machine, when it's crashing, is very, very scary. You're going from a voluntary risk where you're in charge to an involuntary risk where you trust someone or a machine to make the decisions for you. And getting back to this idea, innovation is meaningless without the human element. Unless people feel very, very safe in a vehicle, which is a much more complicated ecosystem than flight, they are not going to accept autonomous vehicles, and they're not going to accept, especially in this COVID phase, getting into a car that somebody else has just been in without it being vaccinated.
Yeah.
So humans are the important part.
I love that you brought it back to the human element because I love what you had to say. That was fascinating. But the human element is so important because we talk about business innovation, but really at the end of the day, effective communication, gratitude, accountability, empathy, those core characteristics that make people human are what kind of gets everything and keeps everything ticking. And so, any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, I mean, I
Thanks for
think
that,
there's kind of a
Eddie.
yeah, and indeed it was very interesting, and I think there's always a tension when it comes to innovation because especially for sole proprietors, startup companies, founders who are pioneering new ideas and so on. We're creative and innovative by nature, right? And so we want to be that, but sometimes we can out innovate ourselves, to the point that was just made. You always have to innovate to customer need and customer demand and where the market is, as opposed to trying to be too smart and innovating, thinking where the market should go.
Right.
And that's a tension because you want to do some of that, and and when you bet right, you win big.
Yeah.
But
there's one of my favorite books that I read forever ago was Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey
Sure,
Moore.
sure.
And I think it's such a relevant book to read today because he has a graph in it where he talks about the pioneers versus the laggards.
Yep.
But I get where the stress would be. I think to myself, God, what would that be like getting in? But I want to kind of move over to Magie Cook when you thank you for that, Eddie. And when it talks about the human element, Magie, you bring a huge human element. I want to give a quick backstory of you. I met Magie probably, what was it now, 10 years ago, maybe, or close to 8 some years ago. She spoke at an event with 150 people, and you could hear a pin drop. I'm going to give you a quick backstory, which is Magie was homeless. She made a salsa that people loved. A random person gave her $800 to make it a business. She did. She sold to Garden Fresh, was sold to Campbell's for $230 million. And so you talk about the human element and sheer grit, right? Your ROG, your return on grit, your return on time. Your story is amazing. You're an amazing human being, as is all of the people that we're talking to today. But talk a little bit about the human element of how you started your salsa company. You're now a keynote speaker talking about business and an author, but just the human element that got you through the mindset when you first started out to grow.
Well, it all comes down to, I think that the reason some people become successful is because of their prior experiences of struggle and wanting something better, a better life, looking for hope. And growing up in an orphanage without having much to even eat, and struggling to survive and experiencing so many different things, you sort of, if you have that character, you sort of grow up to wanting to be more, or to end your suffering.
Mhm.
And with my business and everything, even before I got started, I noticed the three important keys to success that are very invaluable for any and every entrepreneur. And I call it the three R's of highly successful people, which are resilience, relentlessness, and resourcefulness. And they go together, because when you are resourceful, I'm not talking about money, things, people. I'm talking about, we all have inner resources within us that we can explore, that we never thought we had, and that allow us to come up with ideas, solutions, and things to create, to overcome challenges, to break through. You have to be willing to be resilient also, because if somebody tells you can't do something, or have a setback, you have to be able to bend but not break. You
Mhm.
have to be able to continue to move forward. And then relentlessness, I think you have to be able to be willing to do whatever it takes, no matter what. And I have plenty of little uh, interesting stories where I apply all three, and I didn't know I was doing it. It was sort of unconscious, but it was my hunger and my desire to break through and become successful. And it's all related to the bigger part of life, which is your why. Why is it that you're living? Why are you here? And when you connect those, and you have to be willing to, with resilience, to change and pivot no matter what the circumstances are. And I really believe those are the three key things that have helped me to become super successful in life and
Wow.
in business.
I
Mhm.
love what you're talking about, because you're talking about inner awareness, when it comes to resourcefulness and raising your frequency and vibration, is the way I articulate sometimes that,
Yes.
the resilience and the drive to do, whatever it takes. I mean, everything you're talking about, resilience is so important, because as we were talking earlier, a day-to-day business plan, what you need right now, people have worked 3 years in the last 3 months.
Mm.
I mean, and now the summer's here. The amount of energy that it has taken to do what has needed to be done is a ton, and it is the grit, and to wake up every morning. I agree with you, Maggie, and just do whatever it takes. I think that
Yes.
is so spot on. Jeff, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'll add a fourth. Maggie mentioned the why, and I think that's really critical.
So
So
critical.
the reason why you're doing what you're doing really underpins all of these other things. And whether it's to feed my family for sheer survival, or whether it's to prove something, I have something to achieve, I have something to prove, and I want to achieve it, I want to prove it.
Yeah.
The reason why you're doing something, that is a core aspect
Yeah.
of being an entrepreneur, and being able to be resourceful, being able to equip yourself and be relentless, being able to have that resiliency, is really knowing why and staying true to it, why you're doing it, the reason why you're
Right.
doing it, the fourth R. I'll add
Right.
that to the
What
list.
drives you? What
What
wakes
drives
you
you?
up in the
Right,
morning? Oh,
right.
absolutely.
Stay true to it.
Stay true. Thanks, Maggie, for that. That was awesome. I want to move over to Dan Russell, Senior, because we're talking a lot about innovation. We're talking a lot about especially just piggybacking off of what Maggie talked about, resourcefulness. And there's nothing more resourceful than the right people at a company. And right now, I think people are realizing that it's never been more important to have great people. If
Oof.
you want a great company, you must have great people. And people, one of the things I see just as a business coach is a lot of companies keep mediocre people. They don't spend the time putting them in the right seats. Sometimes there is no seat, and I'm a big believer that letting someone go is an act of compassion, because you're setting them free to find something that they love, and you're taking care of the people at the company. And so people are so important. They are your most important resource. And I could point to company after company, or person or book after book, where they will echo that. So Dan, I appreciate you being on the show. Talk a little bit about the importance of people and taking care of your people. I mean, we could talk for 9 hours about just the importance of people and right seats, unique abilities, et cetera. but kind of wrap it in, because everything we're talking about today, we need the right people in the right seats.
Well, thank you, John. And you're right. It all boils down to your people. When you hear from somebody like Maggie, who, came from literally nothing, and her grit, her passion, her drive. So now that's grown into a business. And Maggie realizes she can't do all this by herself. And I think the challenge for most entrepreneurs is the fact that their team has to believe in their vision.
Hmm.
So first off, if you don't deliver that vision to your staff, regardless of how small or large your company is, the company may not know where they're going. So if you look at some very successful companies, it's because the top is letting everyone know what the vision of the company is, what the goals are. And no matter what company you talk to, they all have vision statements, mission statements. But I think now more than ever, we're realizing, what does that really mean? So your mission statement on the wall, are you living it? Did it sound like a great idea when you did your business plan to get financing? But now, is it truly why you started doing it? That's why when Jeff just said, what's your why? Right? So that why now has to play out every single day. And then if you get a team of people that believe in your why and they buy into your vision, now you can see success. And you're seeing a lot of people now, as the world is changing right before our eyes, you're seeing people now that the entrepreneurs or the owners of companies are turning and looking to their team and their individuals in their organization to hone in on their talent.
Hmm.
Because you may have a young adult that just came out of college that, they're like, yeah, Zoom, no problem, we've been doing it for a while, with
Right.
PayPal, of course. So there's different things that younger generations, this is easy for them. John, you and I have talked. The Zoom meetings that I've been on here in the last few months, I've seen some funny stuff, man. I've seen people that get kicked off. I've seen people that are talking, they're going, they don't even know how to unmute themselves. And all of a sudden, it's time for people to adapt. And so you're seeing entrepreneurs having to maybe reevaluate their vision. You're seeing CEOs, presidents, owners who are having to stop and say, am I utilizing the talent that I have within my organization to their fullest capability? And you're really seeing some people having to stop and say, I don't have all the answers. And maybe the way that we've done business for a number of years, it may not work anymore. And I think all of our panelists have said it. With the changes that have happened recently, a lot of these things are here to stay. You are going to see people working remotely, which there's good things with that.
Well,
You
can I just
now
interject
maybe
one thing real quickly? Are you talking about here to stay because companies are realizing they can work remotely? There is profitability, there's trust, there's elements of just being more productive. Yeah.
Absolutely. And John, think about this. If you were looking for a network here locally, well, your talent pool may be this, right? It may be maybe 30 people that qualify as that perfect person that you're looking for. But now if you can work virtually, you may go worldwide with the person you can hire.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a
So
good
that
point.
that team member now could come from anywhere. That absolutely perfect person for the position, maybe in Silicon Valley, they could be in Denver, Colorado, and you're here in Michigan.
Yeah.
So it's here to stay.
It's here to stay. Yeah. No, I love what you're talking about. When it comes to vision and living values, I'd like to ask Michael and Hillary real quickly, how is Berkadia and how are PayPal living their values and living their vision while everyone's working remotely? Because you've got such just nationwide platforms.
Do you want me to start, Michael, and then
Sure.
you
Yeah.
turn it over to you? Yeah, so it's interesting. At Berkadia, we actually went through, and John, you're familiar with this a little bit too. Over the past several years, we kind of reinvented our values and our vision. And one of the things, as it relates most importantly to our values, was being outward and seeing people as people and having an outward mindset, both towards each other, who we work with, and towards our clients. And it took, I mean, we did massive amounts of training in what we called the Berkadia Way, but it was essentially guidelines about how our people should work with each other and appreciating our peers that may be in different lines of business and thinking about how do they perceive this? How do they do their job? And then how does it impact me? And how can I be outward in really understanding what they're going through and what might create friction between us to help work through it? And it seems kind of basic, but I think I'm so grateful that we started that journey 3 years ago, because as we've both gone through this shift in the work environment and working from home and really having to empathize with the challenges that people deal with from care for their family, from, some of our millennials who are feeling really isolated and alone in their apartments, and really putting ourselves in our peers' shoes has been invaluable as we've evolved over the last several months as it relates to our values. And then it's really thinking about where do we go from here and how do we continue, to your point, John. I mean, we have to recreate our business plan every day, even as an organization. Where are we going to be 2 months from now, 3 months from now? And so really being able to put ourselves in our customers' shoes or in each other's shoes and kind of walk in their shoes a little to be able to pivot and understand where to go.
Kudos to you and the Berkadia team for teaching effective communication, because sometimes it's so simple it's complicated. Right.
Yeah, sure. It can be. Yeah.
Okay. So we have 3 minutes left. Okay. Is that what that meant?
Apparently we do. Yep.
Okay. Apparently we do. All right. Let's do a speed round. I thought we had 13 minutes left, but we got 3 minutes left.
It's going to be a real speed round.
So let's do a speed round. All right. We'll start with you, Maggie. And we got literally 3 minutes, so everybody make it quick. Maggie, answer this question. Favorite book and why?
The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. It completely changed my life. It allowed me to see with different eyes. With that, I was able to reinvent my personal life and my business, and just a whole new elevation of spirituality and connection to everything that is.
I love it. And that's the author of also The 4 Agreements, which is one of my favorite books, and Mastery of Love is amazing. Michael, favorite book and why?
Not actually a favorite, but I'm going to try and stick with a theme here. Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
So good.
I mean, I think we're all talking about finding your inner purpose as a company, as a person, and so forth. Like, I think everyone's talked about it, something at PayPal. It's something in a situation like this to really we need to know that deeper purpose. It helps. So read that book if you haven't already.
And The Infinite Game is also another great book by Simon. Hilary, favorite book and why?
I'm actually going to go to one that I read as a girl and adored, which was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And I'm reading it with my daughters right now, who are 10 and 11. And I love how books change as your life evolves and your kind of experience of the book.
Yeah, that sounds like a great book. Dan, Russell, favorite book and why?
Do one thing every day that scares you.
Oh, all right. Okay. Right. I love it.
And the reason, listen, if we're really going to make change in this world, we have to step out. We have to get outside of our comfort zone. And most of all, we have to believe that we can make a difference and we can make change. And it takes some scary steps sometimes, but that's the great thing about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, no, I love that. Eddie, favorite book and why?
Going back to high school English for this one, The Great Gatsby.
Oh, nice. All right, good.
It's because of the economy of it. Fitzgerald in 10,000 words, which is like a long magazine article, gets all the human themes in there and does so elegantly and so brilliantly. So I just keep coming back to that.
I read the Cliff's Notes, I think, of that. And wait, so one more. If we have, I think, a minute and a half, I'm going to ask one more question. If you give the best piece of advice that either you've been given or you want to give to someone who is in business today, just best piece of advice that helped you, that can help somebody else. Eddie, we'll start with you. You each got 15 seconds. All right.
Persevere. That's it. From my father-in-law.
All right. All right. Dan, how about you?
Don't stop dreaming big just because other people don't understand your vision. Don't stop dreaming big.
Good. These are great. Hilary.
Listen. Listen to your clients, listen to your people, listen to your heart.
All right. Michael, how about you? I love that.
Love your employees and they will love your customers.
Yeah. I just want to go back to one thing that Hilary said, listen to your heart. Because I think, heart management is so important today. Heart
And I think-
leadership
and Michael
is so
followed on
critical.
that theme.
And Michael
Yeah.
followed on
Right,
it. Yeah. So I
right,
just wanted to
right.
kind of highlight that.
Yeah.
Well said, Michael. Maggie, how about you? Piece of advice.
I would say if you're a CEO, what are your values? Know what your values are. If they're good, great. If they're not that so good, make them great, and then hire people based on your values.
I love that. Jeff, how
John,
about you?
I'd say carpe diem. This is a tough time, a challenging time, but I'll tell you what, this is the land of opportunity right
Yeah.
now. There are so many opportunities emerging as a result of the crisis we've been facing and
Right.
will face. Carpe diem.
Never waste a good crisis.
I mean, well,
Yeah.
we don't want to ask for anything like that in order to
No.
have positive outcomes, but it is the reality we're living in.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, there is tremendous opportunity
There
right now.
is.
Carpe diem.
I would say my thing would be ask for help. And my parents always told me you can learn from people older than you and younger than you. Never discount anybody's guidance. And like Hilary said, just listen.
Yeah.
I want to thank Jeff. I want to thank you for hosting
Hey.
the show and inviting me. So thank you very much. And I want to thank Magie Cook, Michael Todesco, Hilary Provinse, Dan Russel Sr., and Eddie Alterman. You are all just so full of wisdom. I could talk to you all for hours on end. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your patience today and your wisdom. Thank you for doing everything you do. It's leaders like you that make the world and businesses a better place. So thank you so much. And Jeff, thanks for
Amazing, John.
thanks for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, John.
Thanks
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks.